Hello, hello, folks. It's Amy. It is right at 7 o'clock here in the eastern part of the U.S., and I am getting ready to start quilting on my applique quilt that I've been fiddling with for the last couple of videos. And let me get my bobbin put in there, and then I can spread things out a little bit better and give people a little time to check in. And we're going to start with quilting on these vines. And let me show you the thread colors that I have decided to go with. So my winner for my background quilting is this variegated thread. It is called Affinity in the color Aquarium. This is a thread from Filtech. You can find that at amyquilts.com. It's also what I'm going to use in the bobbin. Look at this gorgeous Tim Holtz fabric. I absolutely adore it. And I'll be using that in the background fill. It'll be fairly subtle. But then I'm going to start off with, this green thread to stitch down our leaves and our stems, and then we'll come in, we'll start doing some background, and then I'll come back into some of these areas with different colors for the different flower portions. So, hey, how are you? I just saw somebody saying hello. Let's see. I always have trouble catching them. So, hey, Marcia, I'm doing well, thank you. Hey, Christy Davis. So, I am going to lock my machine, which is a great time to talk about what machine I'm using. As you can probably see, I'm using a Janome. This is my personal machine. It is a Janome Quilt Maker 15,000, and I absolutely adore this machine. So I need to thread it. I'm just going to leave you guys stay still because I have a hard time threading the machine properly with the camera right where I normally film. So got the top threaded, the bobbins in there. Let's just go ahead and give you guys a little peek at this lovely needle threader. Speaking of needle threaders, I just did a video. I posted it yesterday, day before yesterday. I don't know. It's all a blur. And I have posted it in here on this channel, the Amy Quilts channel, and it's on the two main types of needle threaders for Janome machines. I am a Janome dealer. I do mainly show things on Janome machines. A lot of times you can apply what you learn here to other brands of machine because there is some similarities. And you might want to check that out if you have a Janome and have been having trouble making your needle threader work. It's showing the claw type, which is what you just saw on my machine, as well as the horizontal type that is on a lot of the smaller machines. And I think I'm going to get started right here. I'm using a universal 9014 needle. Using this variegated thread is kind of I won't say a bad thread choice or tricky, but a little challenging given that we're stitching on this green. Because if my bobbin thread pops to the top, depending on what color is going on in that variegated thread, it could be very interesting. So I'm pulling out my little overhead light, and I'm going to give you guys the front row seat to the quilting. Let's try to get it up a little bit. There we go. So thanks for watching. If you find this interesting, I'd love to get a thumbs up or a comment from you. I'm trying my best to read the comments the way YouTube kind of shows me the comments. If I'm not looking at the screen when it gets posted, I don't see it. And I have trouble quilting if I'm not looking at my quilting. So it's reading all the comments or looking at the quilting. And the quilting kind of has to come first. But Your likes and your comments help other people find my content, which helps me keep doing this and helps me help other quilters. Hey, Vonnie, how are you? Now, I can tell that maybe I want to adjust my foot height here. Very important to have your foot set just at the right height if it's a non-hopping foot. And that changes depending on the density of the quilting and the batting you choose. And this guy is going to have some pretty dense quilting because, well, that's what I love to do. And I want to make sure my fabric's not wiggling up underneath the foot. Now, it makes sense to go ahead and do this vine first because it's the first one I'm at, but I'm actually going to backtrack along this edge of the vase, and I'm going to start at one of these longer stems that goes up towards the center because that kind of acts as a type of stabilization for my quilt sandwich. I am using a nice wool cotton blend. It is a Hobbs Tuscany blend. I just saw a thread kind of do a little loop. We'll see if we're having any issues. I think we have a little bad spot in the thread, or the needle may have caught the working thread. Did you know a lot of times when you have shredding in your thread, it's an issue having to do with how the thread comes out the back of the needle, and then sometimes in free motion, the needle pierces the thread that's actually making the stitches. We call it the working thread. That's the, it's about, I'd say it's about 6 to 8 inches of thread that goes down into your bobbin case and around the bobbin case to form one little teeny tiny stitch. And sometimes you pierce that working thread and it causes your thread to shred. Now, all of this little stuff that I'm stitching is fusible applique. And I love doing fusible applique. It just really helps me be really creative without having to do as much thinking, planning, cutting, measuring as I would for applique. So we're stitching right along these edges. Nothing has been stitched on this other than the tablecloth piece that I used a blanket stitch on at the bottom of the vase, the bottom of the piece here. So I'm quilting and stitching my applique down at the same time. I'm trying to make sure that I'm not getting a lot of the back of my hand in your view here. So you want to get really close to the edge, but you don't want to get too close to the edge. And sometimes I am guilty of getting too close to the edge. And then it's easy to kind of, the thread or the fabric kind of frays a little bit at the edge, and you're not really holding the piece down. So I want to give this leaf a little center vein while I'm here. I could add some extra veining, but I think what I've got is plenty. What I like about this batting that I chose is that it's got good loft to it, so I can get some nice puffiness going on in my quilt where it's not stitched. Oh, we've got that issue going on. Oh, I love it when this shows up. I am going to have to download this for my Clubhouse and for my free motion quilting class that I'm getting ready to do. So let's zoom in on this. So we just switched from Watch Amy Quilt to Watch Amy talk about a troubleshooting issue that you might have with free motion quilting. So if you can see the thread right here, it's kind of jumbled up. I'm going to raise my needle. Do you see that? There is, yeah, if the first time I saw this, I was like, how in the world could this have possibly happened? So at the top, I'm sorry for getting all my fingers in here, but I want to give you guys a front row seat. This is the thread as it comes down the front of the needle. Now look, you've got several threads right there wrapped around that thread. And it's just all twisted up in there. And that means that as I've been stitching, most likely anyway, hard to tell right at the moment, that I've pierced my working thread. So I've raised my foot up. Let's see if I can get a little thread over here. And I'm just going to use my thread cutter. It may not cut the top, but it'll cut that bobbin thread for me. I feel like we're dissecting a mystery or something. I'm going to go ahead and cut this. Well, I'm too. There we go. So this is still the needle thread right here in my fingers coming directly from the spool. This is the needle thread as well. And here, I'm going to trim right there. And you'll see that somehow magic has happened. And this is the thread going down into the needle. And it has created a loop right there. You can't get that by accidentally threading improperly. That is a function of the thread either twisting in the bobbin case or as you're stitching, that thread popping underneath the needle as you're stitching. And basically it separates the strands, and that's why it looks like it has frayed. You see this little piece here? It's just really fuzzy and thin. It separates the strands and only half of it gets picked up in the stitch. So I'm going to pop this over to the back. The back looks absolutely perfect. Where'd it go? There it is. Look, absolutely perfect on the back. It's just the top thread. So we are going to, apparently I'm going to knock a bunch of threads off of my machine or my table. And I am going to use my handy dandy seam ripper. This is the Easy Rip and Grip, I think it's called. I didn't know I was going to have to use this tonight. There, I just popped up. There's my bobbin thread here. And this thread is actually tied in a knot around that thread. So I'm going to go ahead and just, let's see. We're going to trim that green thread off of my bobbin thread. There's where we've got another little piece of it there as well. We're going to start stitching back here and just stitch over most of this. In fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and cut right here. So lessons like this will be in my free motion quilting troubleshooting class that I'm working on. In fact, you may see this very footage because it's hard to actually make things do wrong on purpose. And so I dive into a lot of my previous videos to catch things when things have gone wrong. So we're just going to go down and back up, pull up that bobbin thread. Make sure we don't have anything loose right there. Just secure with a couple of stitches. I'll come back and trim those ends off camera. But being able to understand what it is that's caused the problem and how to fix it makes a big difference between feeling like my machine's crap, my thread's crap, I'm crap, my project's crap. You get that kind of feeling sometimes when things go wrong. And it's just a thing to do. I mean, you can't sew a circle without at some point stitching backwards. And again, that allows the thread sometimes to pass under the needle and cause this to happen. And it's just part of it. I caught myself one day trying to figure out, could we make a multi-directional needle to solve the problem? And I realized that would be insanely difficult and expensive to come up with. And I just stopped thinking about it. But it's one of those things that once you recognize it, you just realize it's kind of the luck of the draw. And you fix it and you move on. I think there are some threads that are more prone to that happening. Obviously, the thicker your thread, the more likely you could stitch into your thread and cause a problem. Finer threads won't have that problem as well. As much, I should say, because they don't have as much thread for the hook to accidentally grab or for the needle to accidentally grab. But it all comes from having that thread pass underneath the needle after it makes a stitch. And you won't see that in regular sewing. And I am a fairly slow stitcher. It helps me have control, especially when I'm going around the edges of things. Let's see. We really need to go over here and do this big stem. There we go. Back one stitch, I think. I'm really loving this fusible that I'm using. It's a very lightweight fusible. You have to use a lower heat with it, but it is softer and easier to stitch through than other fusible webs. Now, it may not be a great choice for some projects that might get a lot more rubbing or washing, but for something like this with layers upon layers of applique, it is fabulous. You do have to learn to just use a medium heat iron on it, but it's wonderful. It's called Barely There. You can find it at amyquilts.com. Just enter Barely There into the search bar and it will pop up. If I can, I will add that to our as shown in our videos category of our shop. I try to do that when I do videos. Sometimes I don't mention anything until later. Hey, Patty. So then I try to add it back. Just helps if you're interested in buying it to find it a little easier. And let's come down off of this leaf. Actually, I want to finish this guy. Let's come back onto the leaf and come off here, because that's where we came up from. I don't think it really matters, but it's nice. Now this is where I've got a lot of these stems all kind of overlapping. This time we're going to go ahead and do this guy and come right back down. come back up. You can hear the thumping where all those layers are added. There we go. We're going to come back down here. And I'm just going to come up here. I've got my vase sideways because that helps facilitate the don't stitch backwards kind of thing. And pivot just a little bit so I am not stitching directly backwards. So now one place where this would be a little bit different is if you are stitching on a vintage machine, a really vintage machine, where the needle and the bobbin are in different positions to each other compared to a modern machine, and the needle may be inserted so that the eye of the needle faces the left of the machine, or you may be on a featherweight 221 and the eye of the needle may face to the right of the machine, and that changes the direction. So if I had a machine that was a vintage machine and the needle eye faced to the left, which is fairly common for old Black Singer machines, some other machines out there that are quite old, your direction that you would have to be worried about stitching in and having this issue would be if you are, let me think about this, pulling the fabric to the right. So if I'm pulling the fabric, no, sorry, let me say that again. Pulling it to the left because it's bringing the thread out the back of the needle, which is actually the right side, and causing it to wrap over to the left side. All right, coming back on up in here. And I really want to get a lot of these stems tacked down because I want to do the background quilting. Patty's asking, do I use glide in my bobbin? I do very, very often, most of the time, in fact. But today I am using a variegated version, which is this. And, you know, essentially it's glide, but the official name of the thread is affinity. But that's what's running in my bobbin right now. Oops. Hey, we did it again. Good job, Amy. Oh, broke my thread that time. And I was definitely going sideways that time. And I can't tell what's going on in my machine because when that thread broke, it snapped and wrapped around the take-up lever. Well, this may be a good time to switch to my background thread and do some background quilting because I really wanted to get to that tonight. So let's do that. I'll save some of my troubleshooting exercises for my video course. Not like I intended that to happen because I couldn't make that happen when I want it to. How do I get the bobbin to wind without it being slippy? Well, first of all, I'm going to use both hands to get my thread into the tensioner for winding my bobbin. I'm going to make sure to use, on my machine, I've got a little, it's called the bobbin winding plate, and that grabs the thread and holds it while it gets started. If I didn't have that, I'd make sure to put it through the hole in the bobbin and then hold it until there's plenty of thread wrapped around it. And I don't have any problems with it winding a nice bobbin. So I do have to lock my machine. And if you're not familiar with the concept of locking a machine, in the Janome range, for some of the machines that have an automatic presser foot lift, the computer or a button from the user tells the machine to lift the foot, the tension discs aren't as perfectly aligned. And I shouldn't say perfectly aligned. The tension discs are not directly linked to the foot being down or up. So you tell your machine to open up the tension disc by locking it, and then it threads really nicely. Whereas other machines, you're manually putting the presser foot up when you thread, and that opens the tension discs. And so in this model and several others like it, you have to. Debbie says, excellent tutorial. Good to see how you fixed your thread problem and you just keep stitching along. I would still be fretting. Well, thank you. Oh, an M7. You lucky dog. Yes, this is a great embroidery thread. I love Glide. In fact, that's all I use in my embroidery machines here at the shop or at home if I'm using it. If I'm embroidering. Basically, I do all my embroidering here at the store. I don't have an embroidery machine of my own at home. 9400, I would use the bobbin winding plate. If you're in my clubhouse, there's videos on that. If you are not, I believe I have a couple of videos here on this YouTube channel about about winding a bobbin in it. So let's see, where do I want to start? I should start where I've done some quilting already. And we're going to do some teeny tiny quilting. And when we run out of places to quilt, then it'll be the end of our video. So right here, I'm going to do, let's back you out a little bit. We stitched almost all the way up this stem, and then we had our little thready boo-boo. And we did do all of this one. Well, we did this one too. All right, we'll start over here because both sides are done over here. That's probably a good thing to do. Now, remember, I said I was going to quilt this to death. This may not be your style of quilting, and quilting to death is definitely not something you want to do on a quilt that people want to snuggle under. But for a wall hanging, it's fun. And it's what makes me happy. And I really think that's the biggest part of it, is quilting what, really makes you happy. Patty, with the winding on your 9400, really using both hands and pulling firmly until the thread snaps. It'll make a couple of clicks when you're putting it through that tensioner. That is key. All right, so we are going to just do some teeny tiny quilting because it makes me happy. Sorry, didn't mean to sing. And what am I starting out with? I said I was doing teeny tiny quilting. We're going to quilt this sucker to death. I'm doing feathers. And I've kind of realized this is way too dense for what I want to do, but once you start, you got to stick with it. So this is the scale of the quilting I will be doing on this. We're going to come out into here. Hopefully my battery's going to last. And just do another little swirl. And it's definitely going to be a lot tighter in between the stems. I'll open it up a little bit more as I get going into new areas. And I'm right here on this pink leaf, or not leaf, petal. I'm going to go ahead and stitch around this. We might have a needle issue because it just did it again, and I don't normally have this issue with my machine. Let's see what I can do. This is gonna be one heck of a lesson. I have no idea what time it is. I'm going to cut that thread. I never have this happen that often. And of course, you have to do it live on, YouTube, or who knows how many people can see. We skipped a stitch. We started to have some shredding. Let's look on the back. Where'd it go? There it is. The back looks good, but I can see I'm getting really tiny stitches. I cannot remember when I last changed my needle. But did you know you should change your needle every 6 to 8 hours of stitching? That's actual stitch time. Otherwise, we'd be doing it every day, right? We'll pull that needle through my fingers. I noticed that it kind of got hung up in my needle when I was threading it this last time. If you didn't notice that, go back. My threader got hung up. Now, my husband is a Janome service tech for our shop. Trying to see the brand on. It's a Schmetz. Should be a 9014. I can see the 90. It must be a 9014. It's a universal needle. It's what I usually use. But he says when you start having trouble with your needle threader, a lot of times your needle is slightly bent. And, my stitching is so hit or miss, it can be the needle. So we are going to set that aside. I'm not going to put you guys through me changing out my needle, but I hope the information I gave you tonight was useful, and I will see you next week, same time, same channel. That's Amy Quilts here on YouTube, 7 p.m. Eastern time. That is, let's see, 4 o'clock Pacific. It's early morning if you're in Australia. But thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video, and I'll make sure I start with a good new needle. Bye-bye.